Hello and welcome to the third video in this Unity Basics series where we learn all about Unity. In this video we are going to be learning all about C# scripting. In the last video we learned how to attach a C# script to a game object. So to start this video off, we are just going to go into our project, click create, and then a C# script, and we're just going to name this sample script. We're just going to be learning about C# scripting, so we're not going to add this to any game objects, so we can just make a sample script right here, and we don't have to do anything inside of our actual hierarchy or game. Once our script has been made, we can double click to open it up in our choice of coding editor. Now you can see our script is open. Right here, this is just a public class, and this is the sample script that this is a sample script that we created in Unity. The sample script is the name that we decided in Unity, and you don't really want to go changing this, because if you change this and don't change the name back inside of Unity, then you won't be able to add it to any game objects. This thing right here, this just means that this derives from mono behavior, so it can use all of the Unity things, and only scripts that derive from mono behavior are allowed to attach onto game objects. A few things that you'd like to know about C# scripting are the types of data fields. So if we just want to go up to the top here, we can create a few things. There are a few types of data fields, including floats, integers. You can create strings, and much more. These are just the first three I'm going to be talking about. A float is a number, and you make a float variable by typing the word float, and then you're going to type the name. I'm just going to name this new float, and then I can set it equal to something. A float can be anything from any number you really want, like a big number, or it can also be a decimal. But if you're making a decimal, make sure to put an F after it, just so that we know it's a float, and you have to do that or else you'll get an error inside of your variable. Integers are different from floats because integers cannot be decimals. So if I create this with a 0.1, it just doesn't let me do this, because I get an error down here that says cannot implicitly convert type float to integer, and that's just because integers cannot be decimals. So we can set this integer to something like 10. And then that's what this integer is. You're also not allowed to name variables the same, or else you will get an error too. This string, we can just name it new string, and we can set this equal to a text. String is a text. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these little quotation marks right here, and then inside we are going to put something, right? You can just type, I'm going to put Unity right there. So I just made a string, and then like in the last video, we can just do debug.log, and then inside of there we can just type our new string, and it will just debug.log our Unity, which is nice because we don't have to type it out every single time. We don't have to type Unity out every single time we want to debug.log this. These things are nice and easy because variables are nice so that you are able to change them without having to go change specific numbers inside of your code. You can have variables for these things, so you're able to go up to the top, because I would recommend keeping all your variables at the top, and then you can change them there. There's also a few more things that you can add to variables. What you'll add is at the beginning, you can either add private or public. Private variables are not allowed to be accessed from other scripts. So if I have another script, I cannot access this new float number from it. You're able to access it from other scripts by getting other things. So we can get a variable that it's not a float, an int, or a string, but it's a sample script. We can just name it sample script. And then this is an access to our sample script right here. if this was in another script and not inside of this one, we wouldn't be able to use this. So private floats are just used for things that are specific to one script and one script only, and other scripts don't need them. But if you put the word public before a variable, then it can be used from other scripts. So if I'd like to, let's say if I'm making a game where you shoot enemies and I have my score, maybe I'd want to make that public so that in a script where my enemy dies, I can take my score and make it go up, because once the enemy dies, I can get a little bit more score. But what is helpful for some of these things is that you can make it private. You can also make it so that you can edit it inside of Unity. To do that, we're going to put brackets before it, and then inside of the brackets, we are going to type serialized field, meaning that we cannot access this from another script, but we can still change it inside of the Unity editor so that we don't have to go back into our code to change this kind of stuff. So now you can know that there's a few types of data fields, and you can also reference other scripts. You can also reference things inside of Unity. So for game objects, you can just do game object, and then now I can have a name, so I can name this player, and then this is just a reference to our player if we make this, if we put this as our player. There's lots of other things too. You can get transforms, which is just the position of an object, and that's nice and useful for whatever you really want to use for transforms. And you can do anything really that you'd like to do there. Another helpful thing are lists. Lists you can make by taking the thing that describes your variable, like a float, an integer, a string, or this game objects right here, and I'm just going to put these square brackets right after it, and this is a game object list. So we can just name this list, and lists have lots of different functions that you can use. They can tell you how many things are in the list. You can run through all of the things in the list with a for loop. And lists are very helpful for more than one thing that you need to have, and that you can just check at all of the things. So let's say if I have a game where you shoot down enemies, then I can make a list with all of my enemies, that all of the enemies that are on the screen can be inside of this list. So that if let's say the player does something and all of the enemies have to go down 1 health, then I just take all of the enemies inside of this list and I just subtract 1 from their health. So I don't have to get a reference to every single one of the enemies on screen at every single frame, which would take up a lot of space and make your game run much slower. But these things are just the basics of the Unity scripting, so that you can make things very easy. This debug.log just shows you that you can make variables and change them like that. I am able to change variables by going inside of methods like start or update and setting, let's say I want to set my float variable. I'm going to do new float equals something, so I can just do like 0.1f, or let's say I want to set something to another variable. So I can set my new float to my new integer, which makes sense because a float can be an integer, but an integer cannot be a float. So this little thing works out nicely, but if I do a new int equal to new float, then that will not work out because integers cannot be floats, if you remember. And then these are nice things that you can be able to change your variables for whatever way if you want to change them inside of your code and not inside of the Unity editor or up here when you're declaring them at the first time. I hope you enjoyed this video of Unity Basics, where we learned how the basics of C# scripting inside of Unity to be able to code and make cool game objects in your own way. Thank you.